history goes on and things change, but it's hard to forget some of the things that you're involved in, and then by the same token, collectively it's so easy to forget. Tungston Plantation was one of the largest plantations in the United States that belonged to a single ownership. The Tungston Plantation was owned by Everett P. Larsh, who was an industrialist from Dayton, Ohio, and the plantation was managed by Mr. Lawrence Crampton. Here's a press photo of the tongue crushing mill that was owned by E.P. Larsh, and that was in Capps, Florida, and had some beautiful horses and black Angus cows, and there was a baseball field that the Capps team, Tungston team, I guess it was, played, and the water tank that some of us young folks climbed, and nobody wanted us to do that, and most people didn't know we did it, huh? Anyway, that wasn't good. It was a fun time. And this is a picture of the plantation itself, and you can see the tanks that were a very familiar sight for years as people drove down Highway 27. And then just to the north of, or I guess it's east of there, was the mill itself, and then the electrical plant, which is the block building, and then the office area. Across from the office area, back to the right on the picture, the first building there was a machine shop. That's where my daddy worked and what he ran. And then on further behind that, to the right, was a bin and a warehouse. And then the rest of those buildings behind it were all involved in collection of the tongue nuts, storing them, drying them, and also a couple of places for shops for the vehicles. So that was the Tung Oil Plantation, the working part of it. And this is in the mill itself. And this is courtesy of the Florida Memory. And I remember seeing that very much, and I don't know the man. That was from 1946, but it sure looks a lot like Mr. Rufus Andrews or Oliver. I guess maybe Oliver more. But anyway, they were brothers that worked there. Some mighty fine people. I used to listen to the St. Louis Cardinals when they played the Braves at Mr. Oliver's house, laying on the floor. And the signal on the radio would go and come, but we had a good time. Some of the personal memories I have, and from some of my own pictures, I'm going to relive some things from Capps and Tungston. And here is Mr. Oliver Andrews and his family, Mary Helen and Bruce and Linda, I believe her name was, or is. And then this is the Azame house that has been restored. When we lived in Capps, my good friend Mary and Chancey, who lived with his grandmother and granddaddy, they lived in that, and that was long before it was restored. But I have a lot of good memories from that place, hanging around with Marion and watching TV with his grandma and him. And this is a picture of our new block house in Capps. We moved from the Grove in a house that didn't have running water and the other things it didn't have. And they were building these block houses then, and when they got it ready, we moved in, and that was a hallelujah time. And then here is a picture of my younger brother, picture of my younger brother Steve and Daddy, who had enjoyed and were enjoying a watermelon. I think that was the first time Steve had gotten into that. He was born the last year we were in Capps. And then a picture of my mother and daddy, myself, and my brother Robert. And then here's a picture of Debbie Houston, who is one of the two daughters. Her sister was Brenda, And our pastor at that time was Brother Charles Houston, and he was married to Nell Houston, and unfortunately she passed away later on from cancer, I believe. But anyway, great times of memories here in Caps. There are numerous connections, personal collections, that I was able to see and have and learn after I moved to Carabel, after leaving Caps and going to Alabama and finishing high school there and going to college and then landing a job in Carabel as a teacher and coach. In my years here, it's just been amazing to me to get the confirmation that this is where I'm supposed to be. That's for me anyway, because of the connections between Carabel and my earlier life. And in this case, Debbie Houston, who's the little girl pictured here, when I was ESE director, Exceptional Student Education at that time, I was the director of that program, as well as a few others. The Department of Education ESE Bureau Chief, I believe, I know she had a pretty high position, was, guess who? Miss Debbie Houston. And then, a pretty good time after that, 2 or 3 years, I met her sister Brenda. And I ran her down on the road. We were traveling north toward Havana, and we went around this car, and I looked and I said, I believe I know that. And we stopped at a traffic light, so rolled the window down, said, are you a Houston? I surely am, or was. I'm married to a Wood now. But I said, you're not Debbie, so you must be Brenda. That's who I am. And we just had a great talk there while we were waiting on the traffic light to turn. Probably waited through a couple of turns. Anyway, small world at Tungston Plantation. And here's a picture of a birthday party of mine, and the folks from around the community gathered for my birthday and had a good time. And here's a famous picture of the company store. This was the Tungston Mercantile, and it had a regular grocery store there at the front, the entrance, and then over on the left side was a dry goods place, and then in the very back, and you can see the extension to the left of this picture, that was a 2-lane bowling alley. And then you see the water pump, you see the gasoline pumps out front, Tungston Plantation. In the company store also, between the store itself and the bowling alleys on the right side near Highway 19 was the Tungston Cafe. And Mr. Kessler was the main one that ran that, and he actually was a professional photographer and took the picture of this facility and made a postcard out of it, which is still popular today in some of the antique circles. They were our neighbors, and they loved us and we loved them. They had a dog named Cappy, and they moved to Miami, and Cappy got lost and never found during the Orange Bowl parade. Something that just kind of sticks out to me. And then we look at a bin where they were loading up the dried and drying nuts that had been picked from the groves. And then you see a Mr. Boatwright who was standing in front of the bin that holds those nuts for them to dry more, hopefully, if it doesn't rain too much. And then you see a picture of the grove when it was green and in the early spring. And then you see a picture of the trees in full bloom in the next picture. A beautiful, beautiful sight. And those Tung Oil nuts were too attractive for some people. They want to stop and eat them. And we made a lot of rescues, and sometimes we didn't get there in time to tell them not to because they were poison. So it did make a few people sick. Here's a picture of a postcard that I found when I was doing a little research on Mr. Larsh. This was from 1950, and it was published in the Tung Oil magazine, and it's the March edition, probably in 1950. The cover was 9 1/8 inches wide and 10 1/8 inches deep. And it says that Tungston Plantation extraction plant on Highway 19 south of Tallahassee, Florida is reputed to be the most modern plant in the world for producing tung oil used in paint manufacture. Typewritten part down there mentions Mr. Lars owning the plantation. Before we leave the Tungston Plantation, I found some pictures of abandoned buildings in Florida. And I'm going to give credit on the screen, but it was amazing to me to see the pictures of primarily the power plant at Tungston just prior to their being razed or taken down. And by the way, the neighbor to what was then Tungston in recent years is Ted Turner, as he has a plantation right next to the former Tungston site. But anyway, here are some pictures, and the couple that lived across the street from us, Uncle Bill and Aunt May Henson, is what we went by Uncle and Aunt to them. That's what we called them. But Mr. Bill ran the power plant that supplied power for the whole town of Tungston or the plantation, and it was an amazing operation. And Mr. Bill knew everything to do, and he kept it going. So here's some pictures of memories of what was deteriorating and now doesn't exist. Here's a picture of a patent that Mr. Lars had, one of many. But I found that interesting because we had a fan that wasn't exactly like that. But the guard was a whole lot like that, except it had a few more curlicues in it to, I guess, be a little more protective. Here are a few of the patents that Mr. E.P. Lars had or has. First, there's this electric fan, which we've already seen, the first one, and then this is one that was marketed. And then following that, there's a vibrating machine. I remember seeing those advertised, a weight loss thing. And then armature bearing gear housing is a third one. And fourth was a centrifugal switch, or switches, centrifugal switches. And then finally, there's a motor generated gearing. And that was just a few of the 60 that he has that he patented. And here's just a picture of the actual patent. And this is an interesting article I found, and this was just recently I found it. But Master Electricity, the Master Electric Company, was founded by Mr. Lars in his early life, and I think it was in 1919 or 1920, but must have been 20 because this talks about the 5-year anniversary being 1925. But anyway, this is a pretty modern day article, and it marked the 5th anniversary of Master Power Transmission. And as the person who is writing this writes, as I look back at the last 5 years, I can't help but imagine how the Reeves brothers felt after their 5-year anniversary back in 1893, or E.P. Lars, the founder of Master Electric Company, felt after his company's 5-year anniversary in 1925. Although a lot has changed through the years, the culture of the Master PT is filled with the innovation and entrepreneurial spirit of its founder, at heart, who use their engineering expertise to solve problems. They believe that you build companies with people who are problem solvers, innovators, and entrepreneurs. These shared attributes allowed both companies to develop motors, gearing, variable speed transmissions that were truly leaps and bounds beyond what was available in the market at that time. Both the Reeves brothers and E.P. Larsh took pride not only in their products, but also in the communities that helped build the products. I think there's a lot to be learned from just that. Copy of Mr. Larsh's obituary I found, this reference to it anyway. It says that, you can read this, but a copy of his obituary obtained from Memorial Park Cemetery states that Everett P. Larsh, aged 90, passed away in Miami, Florida, 17th of November in 1976. He was a retired industrialist and inventor. He was chairman of the board of Master Electric Company until its merger with Reliance Electric Company in 1958. He was a fellow in IEEE, an inventor with over 60 patents to his name, and was a member of the First Lutheran Church, and the funeral services were held at the Masonic Temple. He was a 50-year member of the Engineers Club, can be justly proud to include the name of the Everett P. Larsh in our Valley of the Giants. Before we move on, I just wanted to show you some pictures and make some connections I was so glad that they were made in the association of my past, my early life, and the things that I treasured and people that I looked up to, and then moving to Carabel and over the years making being reconnected with some of those people. First here is a Judge Sandy Sauls. When I was in junior high school and played basketball on the B team, Sandy was a high-scoring high school basketball player, and we all practiced together most of the time in the gym, but I really enjoyed watching him play because he could really shoot the eyes out of the ball, and I don't remember how many points he made by any means, but he made a lot of them. And then years later, in the election that was contested between Al Gore and George W. Bush, when it was contested and went to court, guess who the judge was in the trial? It was Judge Sandy Sauls, who from time to time I would see at the breakfast place in Crawfordville, which was at that time the Huddle House, and we had a few conversations remembering old times, but he'd rather talk about hunting, I believe. So anyway, I admired Sandy when he was a high school ball player. He always was friendly and just a really good guy, and very happy with his success, and now he's retired. And then church was a big part of our life, as it always was. While we lived in Tungston, we went to church at Ebenezer Baptist Church, and here you see a picture of that. And the pastors that we had while we were there included Brother Walter Bailey and Brother Charles Houston. We've already talked about the Houstons, but Brother Bailey, actually I accepted the Lord while he was our pastor, and went down and told him about it, and he was happy and presented to the church. And then he is the pastor that baptized me in the Osceola River. And I really admired him and his family, and his family included Daryl, and we spent a lot of time together. He had several kids, and we played together, and a lot of times our parents would eat lunch together, and we would be able to play and have a good time. And then not long ago, living in Carabel, and I don't remember where we were, at a restaurant somewhere, and I met Brother Walter's niece, and we had a lot of things to share as far as memories. He was a real special man, very good preacher. And then, before that, I went out to Two Brothers when it was out on Highway 98, and went in, and I had been there several times on a weekly basis, bringing CDs of my Bible study ministry. And Sandy and Shannon started talking with me one time, or I asked them if they would like to have a CD. I believe the way it started. And, oh yes, and we just had a great time talking, and we hadn't talked 3 or 4 minutes before we realized that they had been members and attended Ebenezer Baptist Church. Now, that was after we had already moved to Carabel, but I remember our association and talking about the church, and Shannon and I talked about walking on the roots of the old oak tree that's out in front of the church. So it's a small world, and those are just connections with Carabel and my earlier life there in Tungston.